Let us pray. Gracious and eternal God, we do indeed thank you, Lord, for the gift of your word and the many ways that you speak to us, O Lord, and prompt us to tell our stories of what you've done for us. And now hide me behind the cross. Decrease me, O God, and increase you within me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I first went into ministry in 2001. And I received my first full official ministry position in 2006, so about 14 years ago. And when I got there, I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, God has given me a call to ministry, so I guess that means I have to show up like all the ministers that I've seen around me show up. So I began kind of imitating doing ministry like the pastors around me that I saw. I would wear like suits to work, which is not me. When people would tell me something shocking that had happened to them, stories of abuse or harm or disrespect or dismissal or denial, I would sit there kind of with no feeling and say, tell me more. And for those of you who know me, you know that nothing hides on my face. I can hide nothing on my face. If I'm shocked, you'll know it. If I'm angry, you will know it. If I'm sad, you'll know it. And if I'm filled with joy, you'll know that too. And so what this resulted in, me showing up not as myself in the calling that God had given me, it looked like me becoming burned out and tired and having a lot of health issues, and me leaving ministry for about 2 years. And me having quiet time with the Lord every day in those 2 years. And God reaffirming me by his grace and reminding me by his grace that God had given me a voice. God had given me an identity as a child of God. God had given me an experience, and God had given me a story. And I was to tell that. And I went back into ministry, renewed by God's grace, energized by God's grace, with a story of healing, a story of grace, a story of love, and a story of how I'd walked with him since I was 15. And I told that story to everybody that I came across. And I was blessed. I was shocked, actually. Because when I showed up as myself, when I cried with people, when I was joyful with people when they were joyful, when I was angry with people when they were angry about things that had happened to them, then they could see Jesus in me. And they could more closely connect with what God had done in their lives and was doing, and what God did for me. The story that Wendy read for us this morning is taken out of John 9, and it's one of my favorite scriptures. Because in this scripture, we see a man born blind. And the story begins with the disciples saying to Jesus, is this man born blind because of something that he did, or his parents did? Like, what is the deal? Like, he must have done something wrong, the reason that he's born blind. And Jesus tells them that it's not that at all. That he's born blind so that the glory of God can be revealed. Church, sometimes we find ourselves in tough places and going through many things in life because life is so uncertain, not because of anything that we've done. One of my clergy colleagues quotes in the season that my family and I were going through about 11 years ago. And it was a very, very difficult season in the life of our family. And she came to pick me up one day at an apartment complex that we lived in because our car had broken down. And this was like the cherry on top of all of the other things that were happening. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? And And she came to pick me up. And she said something that was so comforting to me. She said, Enger, sometimes it's not a light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes it's another train coming to run you over. The blind man wasn't theologically trained. He hadn't pastored a church or served in ministry. He didn't have special skills or talents. He just had a story. And he had Jesus and his story of how Jesus healed him. And when people started questioning him and his family and his friends and folks in the village, and later on in the story he gets questioned by the Pharisees, he says to them, I don't know about any of that. All I know is that I was blind and now I see. In the book that we're studying, both here and at LifeGate, The Emotionally Healthy Church, Peter Scazzaro talks about living in brokenness and vulnerability, and how us telling our stories about our own brokenness and vulnerability, and how the Lord has redeemed us and healed us and transformed us, is so important in our lives as believers. Our culture hates to hear that they're broken and in need of healing, especially if nothing is going horribly wrong in someone's life, and especially when everything appears to be fine. Our human instinct in those times and in times when we're struggling is to cover up our brokenness and weaknesses. We don't want people to see us bleeding. And he talks about the fact that there are three responses to not engaging our brokenness and vulnerability. The first one is running. The first one is fighting. And we can do that through being like real guarded and angry and bitter, criticizing everything and everyone. And the last one he talks about is hiding. And we can hide in many ways, and as a matter of fact, we do that every single day. When someone asks us the question, how are you? And what do we respond with? I'm fine. Or it's all good. What Scazzaro says is this: everyone is broken, damaged, cracked, and imperfect. It is a common thread of all humanity, even for those who deny its reality in their life. His words sound like the Apostle Paul in Romans 3:23, when he says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And church, God meets us at each of these points, the points of our brokenness. And God meets us time and time again, not just the first time that we were saved or the first time we were transformed by God's grace. God meets us again and again at the points of our brokenness to change us and to heal us and to transform us so that we can tell our story of transformation so someone else can meet Jesus. I remember the first time that someone walked into my office when I first went to ministry and said, I'm angry at God. I said, sister, I know that feeling. And she was shocked because she thought that I would berate her for being angry with God. And I responded with, God is way bigger than that and big enough to take it. All of us have a story of transformation to share. You don't need to be well-spoken. You don't need to be a pastor. You don't need to have gone to seminary or anything like that. Have you ever considered that sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ is the way others can come to know God and live a life transformed that is deep and rich and full? Church, your stories matter. They matter to somebody. Many in our world think that they can't be part of God's story or Jesus' church because their story, their whole story is dirty or wrong or bad or not acceptable. Friends, I have news for us this morning. None of us are good or acceptable to God without Jesus' saving grace at work in us. It's God that makes us good. We have the privilege of telling others the God story the whole story, and then our story of how Jesus is at work in us. I want to invite Jim Lockerbie to come forward now and tell his story of how God healed him of his deep grief.
So I'm wearing a U2 concert shirt because they came up with a song. It's called Stuck in a Moment. And at the end of the song it says, "And this moment shall pass too." And I was stuck in a moment. As many of you know, I came to the church with my mother and my grandmother when the Calvary Church closed. I was a young boy. And I grew up with the church. After graduating high school, I became an on and operator. And we take all kinds of calls, and some of them stick with us. And in 1995, when I became a dispatcher, throughout all the emergency services and even in the clergy, you just were taught, here's your job, now go do it. And especially in like law enforcement and emergency services, it was work hard, party harder. And it was like a sign of weakness to share stories and stuff. And my brother passed away August 25th, 2013. And my two worlds collided. My personal life and my career, my 911 life, they collided. And I could not get beyond my brother's passing. I tried lots of stuff, and lots of people tried helping me. There's a scene in an old airplane movie, the movie Airplane, where they have to stop panicking, and like everyone just keeps up and smacks the woman in the face with all kinds of stuff, and she just couldn't get past. Or people were doing that for me, and I just couldn't get beyond the moment. So I went to different therapists, and each one gave me a little bit, and it like chipped away from the rock that was surrounding the situation. And the third gentleman was a Christian therapist. And I went down a list of all the things that I had lost. I lost my brother, I lost a house, I lost another loved one who's still with us, I lost my grandmother, my aunt, and I was like, what did I do? What did I do? Why am I being punished this way? And the therapist is like, dude, that's not how God works. That's not how any of this works. And he talked to me about it, and then we prayed, and then I left. And as I'm driving home, a man is walking in the middle of the street. He's in the middle of the lane that I was driving. And I was like, what is this guy doing? Like, he wants to get hit. So I had to drive around him, and I'm like, I gotta call my work, which if anyone in here is a member of this emergency services or a former member, we don't call your work unless it's something that you have to. It's like blinders on. You don't want to be that guy that's always calling, right? So this was something that drove me to pick up the phone and call my work. And I called, and I was like, I got my friend Mark. I was like, Mark, there's a guy, he's walking in the middle of the street. You got to send somebody. We got to find out what this guy's all about. So as I'm going down the street, I turn around because now I'm thinking I want to go back because sometimes patrol is not available right away. Well, as I'm driving back towards the gentleman, we see a patrol car going the other direction. So he had to have either picked him up, talked to him, whatever. Because I get back to the location where I saw him, and he was gone. He wasn't there. So, and as I'm driving, as I'm making this phone call, I'm emotional, I'm crying. And I'm trying to hold back the tears, and I'm describing what's going on, and I'm sharing that. and I can't find him. So I call Mark back after not being able to find him. And he's like, I'm like, did anyone else see this guy? Did anyone else call? He goes, yeah, we got a couple calls. You were like the second guy to call. I'm like, all right, did patrol's find him? No, patrol was there. It was all clear. So either someone out of the kindness of their heart picked him up, took him, and drove him away, or he walked, finally just walked into the house, the nearby house or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what happened to that gentleman. But the amazing thing was, all the people trying to help me, 3 different therapists, my coworkers, family members, of people I've been on social media, the I Am 911 movement, where there's dispatchers across the country sharing their stories. That kind of helped too, being part of that, sharing my story. But none of that could help get me out of that moment that I was stuck in, the grief of losing my brother. And when I made that phone call and I tried to help that gentleman, and that was the opportunity, that was God intervening, that was God saying, like, look, you did what you could, and here's an opportunity to try to help someone else. And the next day when I woke up, that nagging feeling that I had about the loss of my brother, and just the pain and all the grief of losing my brother was gone. It was gone. It's like a new day. And now there's times like the blind man, like I was walking blind, I didn't see a lot of God's good work, and now I'm seeing it. Like everywhere I go, I'm seeing amazing things. And one of the gentlemen that created the I Am 911, I was able to meet him personally at a conference because he's in Detroit. We met in Maryland. And be able to share and talk to him in person was an amazing experience. So you think you can do it yourself. You think you can save yourself. But then, you need help. And God's there. And God was there that afternoon when He gave me the opportunity to do what I couldn't do for my brother. Call and try to stop things from happening. Thank you.
Jim, thank you so much for sharing. Church, imagine if we as a community began to take our own stories as seriously as Jim's did. What if we got a little better at noticing God's handiwork in daily moments in our week, in others' lives, or over the course of our own lives? This picture that you all have been staring at, I had seen on Facebook a couple weeks ago. And the Spirit of the Lord has just been speaking mightily throughout this whole sermon series, telling the story. And one of my clergy colleagues had posted it, and it says, one day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now, and it will become part of someone else's survival guide. But church, the stories that God has brought all of us through, and the stories that we have, that we are to share with others about what God has done for us, they not only are survival guides, they're stories of how the Spirit of the Lord helps us thrive. It's not that things immediately went away in Jim's life. It's not that the struggles and the hardships and the trials and the pains and the suffering of life will immediately go away. It's that the Spirit of the Lord opens our eyes in the midst of that pain so that we can testify to the goodness of God in the midst of what we're going through. Amen? Amen. What if we made a commitment to listening to each other's stories and sharing our own and celebrating those transformational stories in people's lives? Our church and our community and our world would begin to change from our story of God's love. May God give us the strength and the grace and the love to share our stories, to tell the story of how we've overcome by God's grace and what Jesus has done for us. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. Gracious and eternal God, I give you thanks and praise for everyone here, Lord, and I give you thanks and praise for Jim's testimony this morning. Lord, help us to remember that it is you that makes us good. And that our stories of brokenness and vulnerability and how we've overcome sin and coming out of so many struggles, Lord, by your grace and by your love and by your strength, that others need to hear that in our broken world, so that they might know your love and come to a saving knowledge of you. Help us to tell that story every day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.